Hello and welcome to TSK F1. My name's Rich and this is your daily dose of F1 news. Today we're going to be talking about the F1 tyres being put out to tender, so other tyre manufacturers could come into the sport. Also, we've got, what's his name? This is a good start. Rosberg talking about how Russell could be Lewis's firmest test so far. And also, we're just going to generally talk about Lando Norris because there are different reports, none of them with any basis, coming out around the Lando Norris situation at McLaren. So before we go any further, please do make sure you're hitting like on the stream, getting involved in the chat and subscribing down below. How are we all doing this morning? Now, let's have a cheeky look at this first thing. Now, as it was Pascal who mentioned it yesterday on my other channel, the F1 Tyre contract is being put out to tender. This is a very normal thing. Every few years, the contract runs out, and then F1 puts the tyre contract out to tender. I don't see anyone else winning it beyond Pirelli, quite honestly, but this one is going forward. Now, the successful applicant will also gain the contract for Formula 2 and Formula 3, and they would be keeping the same kind of tyre. So you would be keeping the same size of tyre and also the same degradation and things like this. But added to what was agreed in the last contract, they would be expected to provide whole tyre life cycle environmental impacts and how they're going to dispose of the old tyres, what they're going to do with them, how they might recycle and things like this. But yeah, this is going out to tender, and F2 and F3 details are going to come out in the next fortnight. But again, this is a very normal thing. It has to happen every so often to make sure the correct thing is being done for the sport. But again, this is just normal. When it was first mentioned to me yesterday, I figured the contract must be up, and that is indeed the case. The new deal will come into effect from 2025 and will last for at least 3 seasons, while an option for 2028 will also be up for consideration. Continuing the 23-inch specification for the 18-inch wheel rims, enlarged for 2022. FIA said the targets have been agreed through consultation with the commercial rights holders, Formula 1, Liberty Media, and the teams. They are designed to ensure a wide working range, minimize overheating, and have low degradation while creating the possibility for variation in strategy. Could there be? Technically, yes. Will there be? I highly doubt it, Pascal. This, I think Pirelli have been through this twice now. This is the third time that this is happening. I think it would be difficult to beat Pirelli's if Pirelli want it, I'm pretty sure it's there. I mean, even the FIA's own statement says this is a customary invitation to tender. So they're not. Like other suppliers may well say, we'll have a go, but the tender will also require potential suppliers to supply an analysis of the environmental impact of the tyres used in Formula 1, and the successful bid will need to demonstrate best practice and innovation when considering the complete life cycle of the tyres. Honestly, again, this is very normal. This is like, you can file this alongside when it's not even making big news. Like when I went on my news aggregators and things like this wasn't even reported. That's how run-of-the-mill it is. But from 2025, there could be a new tyre supplier. I don't see it happening, and I don't think they want to return to tyre war times, you know, where there's multiple tyre manufacturers. I don't know, John, you know, I don't know, because look, I think if another, it's a good question, because that's how I've approached this. Like, you know, who is it is it Goodyear that's the parent company? But that group, because they've got a few brands, right? And you've got Bridgestone and things like this. they might put in something, but I feel like you'd look at the Pirelli deal with Formula One and think it's theirs, isn't it? Is it Bridgestone or Firestone that do IndyCar? I can't remember. I can't remember if they do. I can't remember. But I don't know. This is just a normal thing. This is just a normal thing in Formula One because contracts come to an end, right? But the amount of R&D, the amount of time, the amount of resource, and Pirelli are very set up for it, aren't they? To me, it would need to be a huge process to try and win over. Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. They're like embedded. I think the only way another tyre provider comes in is if Pirelli decide they want out. Much like, was it Michelin and Bridgestone pretty much did that back in the day? I seem to think it was Bridgestone, and then Bridgestone backed out, and as Bridgestone backed out, Pirelli came in. For a short time, it was Pirelli and Michelin, but Michelin then decided they wanted out, if I remember rightly, because the tyre war stuff just costs them so much money. So I don't believe it'll go back to a tyre war type. A tyre war thing is directly against everything Formula One proclaims it's after. And to be fair, everything in this article says it's worded like a sole tyre supplier. But there you go. There is a bit of news. Thank you, Pascal, for bringing it to my attention. Because unless I really looked for it, I wouldn't have seen it, to be honest, because it was... it just wasn't really highlighted anywhere. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. But there we go. Soon enough. And so in the next few weeks, we'll probably hear about F2 and F3 as well being up for grabs. But they might be giving them a different technical brief, because it does say a more detailed technical brief for F2 and F3. So maybe they're changing something for that. I don't know. Indianapolis race was the Michelin failure, wasn't it? Yeah. I've just realised that mic still. There we go. Was the Michelin failure. But there we are. I honestly think it's going to be... I think it's going to be Pirelli. I think what you'll find, if you remember back to the beginning of Pirelli, they really had that cliff, if you remember. I think the amount of R&D that's gone into these Pirelli tyres, I think they're in a good spot. I think would people agree with that? That the tyres are in a good spot? I think they are, because I know in the wet weather, a lot of people say, the wet tyres are useless, but I think that's less of a Pirelli issue and more of a inherent modern Formula One car issue. I mean, they're ground effect cars. They're going to struggle in the wet. It's a problem for them. So I still think it's less of a Pirelli problem, because they do still dispel a hell of a lot of water. I know they've worked on them for this season, but I think when those wet tyres become viable as a tyre, the cars become unviable, and that's the actual issue. But that's just a personal opinion that I know not many agree with. But there we are, Pirelli. And the tyre stuff is out to tender. It was a different concept with the cliff, etc. Tyres are all good. Few issues along the way, resolve them. Yeah, exactly. Like the exploding problem when they were going over the back of curbs, and they fixed it, didn't they? Now, a little bit different. Nico Rosberg has actually said that he believes George Russell is Lewis Hamilton's biggest test, because George is a future world champion, and this is a difficult one for Lewis to stay in front. And he said about last year, and I honestly felt like that was a bump, because all of the reports coming out of Mercedes, even from George, absolutely everyone, was that Lewis Hamilton was testing the experimental stuff, right? Which it makes sense that he's the one you're going to give that stuff to, isn't he? Being the multiple world champion, you're gonna give him the difficult stuff. But Rosberg rightly has noted that George Russell is continuing the form into this year. Now, you guys, if you've been around long enough, know I rate George Russell really, really heavily, like highly even. And it's not surprising. Now, do I think Lewis Hamilton has fallen off? No. Do I think George Russell is going to be a world champion? Yes. If Lewis Hamilton's connected with the car and George Russell's connected with the car, I still think Lewis has George Russell. But there will be a point. There will be a point. I don't think it's yet, but there will be a point that Lewis Hamilton's inherent speed and stuff dissipates somewhat just with age. It's natural, and it comes to every driver or every professional in every sport at some point, whether it's the body failing them or whatever it is, whether it's reaction times. I don't think we're there yet. I know people like to comment on social media about Lewis Hamilton, Finnish driver, but look, me and John were looking at a TikTok the other day of Johnny Herbert saying to Fernando Alonso he should retire, and that was like 4 years ago or longer. And how wrong was that? So I just think at the moment that Mercedes are in this space where George is sort of making the most of it, and Lewis, on the one hand, I think he's somewhat demotivated, but on the other hand as well, I think he's really not got the balance of that car, and he's struggling because of it. Because you've got to have that almost telepathic connection with the car, and I don't think Lewis Hamilton has that right now. And I'm not saying George particularly does, but maybe coming from the Williams and more recently struggling than Lewis Hamilton, maybe he's just getting on with it and is able to stay more positive about it because he's still in the Mercedes. He still knows that he's probably going to be able to win titles with them in the future. And maybe at the back of Lewis Hamilton's mind, he's more aware than ever that the number of seasons he has left are numbered. You know, when you're George Russell's age, you've got forever in front of you. But when you're Lewis Hamilton's age, you count in the number of seasons left on one hand, aren't you? You know, potentially. Because no matter how much I'm a fan of Fernando Alonso, what is he, 41 now? How many seasons is he actually going to be able to maintain this level of performance? Even as an elite athlete, how long can he maintain this level of performance? And I honestly, let's be real, I can't see him, even a modern Formula One driver, I cannot see them going past 45, no matter how dedicated, how physically fit they are, because Fernando Alonso's already spoken at length of how hard he has to work on his fitness and conditioning now to do what he used to do. Not no trouble, but he just used to do it, you know. But now he really has to try very hard with his fitness and work really hard to maintain that level. So there we are. John says, I think Russell has got the adaptability from developing the Williams car and making the most of it. Hamilton seems a bit dejected. They were really close in the last GP. It's very interesting, that, John, and that was an observation I made during the race. It really surprised me when Lewis was on the mediums and Russell was on old hard tyres that Lewis seemed to drive up to the back of Russell and then held it, and then dropped back a bit. Now, I don't know whether they had the radio message like, guys, we're good here. We're good here. And maybe because Hamilton knows he's not in for a title, he was like, that's okay then. Or he just accepted it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not making excuses for him. It just seemed odd to me that Lewis Hamilton had the fresher medium tyres, drove up to the back of Russell and then he got into the DRS, but he still just sort of sat at the edge of DRS and then dropped back to 3 seconds and held it at 3 seconds for the last... Yeah, I didn't hear any of it either, John. I didn't hear any of it either. So I'm not making excuses. I just found it odd. I found it really odd because he was catching... Was it... Who was it that went past? George. Was it Verstappen? No. Yeah. Maybe. I'm trying to think. It wasn't... Was it Alonso? I'm trying to think who it was. I think it might have been Verstappen, because Verstappen just drove right by Lewis. He had no defence. There was no defending it, despite what idiots on Twitter are saying. He had like 30 kilometres an hour overspeed on the straight. You can't defend that. It's impossible. I'm not giving him... I don't think I'm not giving him credit, am I? I've literally just said that, Nick. I'm just pointing out the obvious. We all know the delta on new mediums compared to old hard tyres, and it seemed odd to me that Lewis drove up to the back of him and then didn't. I think Russell is a god. No. I mean, look, I've said hundreds of times, even as he got his driving Williams, George Russell's going to be a triple world champion. I don't know what you want me to say, Nick, to be honest. I'm not giving him credit. I'm just saying it was odd to me. Yeah, there's no defense. You're just gonna, you're going to, it was just an odd one to me that I noticed. It's just an odd one to me that I noticed that, on the newer tyres, you would have expected... Like I said, in fact, if I remember rightly, in the watch-along, I thought Mercedes were going to tell George to pull over. Honestly, on one of those let Lewis have a go, because he's on the newer tyre things, and if he can, we'll swap back at the end. But there was none of it, was there? So... I'm not saying, oh, they should have had team orders and let Lewis score more. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in that situation, he was driving up to the back of him, and I really expected, George, let Lewis pass, you're on different strats. If he can't keep up, we'll swap it back or whatever. There was none. There was none of it at all. And we've seen that thousands of times in Formula One, and I honestly expected it in that moment. And I'm not, just to clarify again, for those at the back, I'm not saying give him the points. I'm saying it was odd to me, all of it. Yeah, Russell is a class act. The point is there wasn't a fight there. That's the point I'm making, yeah. I think as long as there's a gap to Ferrari, Mercedes were happy where they were. I don't think they thought they could catch Alonso, so didn't take any chances. Possibly. It just seems strange not to have a go. But anyway, all Russell drove off knowing his position was under threat. Maybe. Don't know. I don't know. It's just observations. That's what the conversation is about. It's what this channel is all about, guys. Different opinions. But those who know me know I was giving George Russell praise before anyone was even looking at him. So yeah. Last story. Now this is kind of an opinion thing that we've been talking about on the channel quite a bit. Really. Now, this isn't... I'm going to start this off by saying this isn't really based on anything. We can talk for the next 10 minutes or so on this. This isn't based on anything. This is pure us having a conversation. I'll bring you what I've seen, and also we can have a chat about it and just share our opinions. Now, there's an article out of, well, actually, it's not great. Well, actually, they've had some stuff, actually, shockingly, but it's out of the Express. And they've posted a big thing about how McLaren risk pushing Lando Norris out to Mercedes. And they've got the quote from Lando where he said, "I could have quite easily probably kept position at the end and got past the Williams of Logan Sargent. But yeah, I just let him go in the end. It would be different if I was fighting for points, but 16th and 17th, it doesn't really matter." And their whole premise of their story is that they believe that Lando Norris is set for Mercedes. Now, I've temporarily lost it, but there was two others. There was two others as well. One saying that Lando's already in talks with Red Bull, and another saying that Ferrari want him. So it seems to me that the general media are basically saying Lando Norris isn't happy and he could go anywhere. And then everyone's taking a guess. Now, the one that where they were saying that he's already in talks with Red Bull, I completely believe that a lot of drivers have a lot of conversations. And I completely believe that there's been a tentative conversation. The same way I believe there will have been a tentative conversation with Mick Schumacher and Red Bull. Or, let me think of another driver that's not affiliated. Or, I don't know, Logan Sargent and Red Bull. You know, there's always little chats going on. We know this to be fact. Whether it's a serious chat, whether it's a just a little probing chat, whatever it is, they are always going on. Now, the seriousness of the discussions or the mindset of Lando Norris, it's more difficult to tell, isn't it? Now, a lot of people, I don't know why, I do wonder whether it's just because of the British connection that people think Lando will go to Mercedes. Because I can't get my head past the thought of him and Red Bull, honestly. I feel like him and Red Bull are a match made in heaven. He does live streaming, he's got clothing brand, he's got appeal, he's got banter, he's got, you know, the sense of humour. He just strikes me as a very, very, I think it's more of a Red Bull driver than a Mercedes thing. I think the more we have spoke about this issue, and I think going to any of the top teams now, he would be a number 2 driver, and he isn't that. This is the problem, isn't it? I think he's more of a Red Bull driver, but if he was to go to Ferrari, Leclerc's number 1. If he goes to Mercedes, George Russell is number 1 over Lando Norris. Objectively and by any measurement, George Russell would be and should be the number 1 driver over Lando Norris. Or go and look up history. George Russell should and would be number 1. And if he goes to Red Bull, Max is the boy. And I agree with Nick. The new regs, maybe he holds out, and maybe he holds out a few difficult seasons at McLaren, and he starts tapping up Audi and saying, look, I'll come to you, but I want money and I want number 1. Like, I want solid as a rock, number 1, preference, everything. And if you give me the car, I'll win you world championships. Maybe he does that. But I'd love your opinions on it. Like what Nick's just said, I agree with the Audi shout. I think that's a good idea. I don't see an opening anywhere else for him. You know, I think even Piastri in that McLaren's a horrific waste. Now, will it have annoyed him? Because I think I'm right in saying, could he replace Alonso in a few years? Well, there's a shout. Could he replace Alonso in a few years? Maybe. I originally thought it was a possibility he'd end up at Merck due to his father, but he'd actually suit Red Bull far more, and I actually think he'd push I rate Norris higher than most others. A lot of people do think Norris is right up there with the very best. They do. And I don't dispute that. I think he's an elite driver. I just think he has to do more, but he does need the equipment, right? He just need, for me, I see it, but like nearly under any circumstance, he lost out to Piastri the other day, didn't he? I'm nearly sure he lost out to Piastri the other day. He can't be doing that. He can't be doing that, can he? Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it, John? And one of the few he didn't rinse was George Russell. That's the only point I make about Mercedes. But Saudi result, F1. I'm sure. Like, it can be an inch or a mile, but if he got beat by him, he got beat by him. He did, yeah. And it was only a second and a half, but it to me. Look, you may have watched my preseason predictions video with John and Harry, and what I said about Piastri, but I mean it is only the second race, and it might only be a second and a half, but Piastri did finish ahead of him. Now, well, I mean, it's interesting. My issue is that he's had the opportunity for a couple of wins and blown them chances. Take Danny Rick, the same machinery, had one chance and got the win. Well, yeah. Just a single season. I think Nor versus Russ would be a great battle. Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would. Yeah, I think it would be a good battle. I think Russell wins, though, out of the two. Where do you guys see him? One word for one team. Where do you see him going? I quite like the Audi shout, but that's 2026. Could he last in a McLaren doing this until 2026? Should he last in a McLaren until 2026? You know, that's not good. That's writing off basically, well, yeah, 3 seasons, isn't it? Including this one. It's a difficult one. I like the Audi shout, but could he really? He deserves the status as a number one. That's the difficulty, isn't it? It's horrible, isn't it? When you're looking at this, the finishing positions, Danny Rick has the RB seat. I think you're drunk. I wonder if Piastri feels a bit stupid now. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Piastri right now, look, I'm confident, and again, people might not agree with me. Ocon was 8th and Gasly was 9th, about a second and a half apart in the last race. I'm confident in saying Piastri in that Alpine beats both of them. I think he's closer to Leclerc in the Ferrari than either of them. And I strongly feel that. I don't think Danny Rick. I don't think we'll see Danny Rick in a Red Bull. Big hoo-ha and goes to the back. Indeed, they've messed up big time. McLaren's supposedly going a lot better by race 5, 6. This is the issue, though, isn't it, Gled? This is the issue. So will everyone else. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem for McLaren. If they find half a second, will everyone else as well? You know, that's the problem, isn't it? Like, they're off at the back. Like, okay, Lando, okay, we'll go Piastri, finished 85 seconds back. And the points were 21 seconds up the road. So, in effect, they do need to find half a second a lap to get in the points. You know. yeah, I'm not disputing that they're going to be going better. It's just they have to be going a hell of a lot better. The only positive I can see is that McLaren should have the facilities at their disposal with the additional wind tunnel. Yeah, probably. Everyone needs to find a second to be on pace with Red Bull, and Red Bull stand still. Well, I'm either going to do a video or a YouTube short, because they're saying, aren't they, the murmurings out of Mercedes are that they are finding huge chunks of time. I mean, we're about to end, but the murmurings are, well, not murmurings, they've flat out said it, George and Toto, that they are finding huge amounts of time, the most they've found. George said in the last week they found more than they found in the entire winter. Mercedes did. But Toto said they don't think they can get it on the car soon enough to challenge. Now, just real quick, I want to back myself here as well, because I've been saying this, right, the Mercedes stuck with their concept because they couldn't get data, because I said they couldn't get the data because of the porpoising, so they had to stick with the concept and trust the data. And that does seem to be the case, because Toto said they needed the Bahrain test and the Bahrain Grand Prix to prove like where they were wrong, and it did. And there you are. Now, I need to check that. Has that come from Skygled? Right. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I remember very vividly when I checked that in race, it was 37 kilometers an hour, but that was front to back. When I looked, because I on my screen, I pulled up like the speed trap leaderboard, and top was Verstappen, followed by Perez, and then Russell was last, and it was 37 from Verstappen to Russell at the back. And then between Perez, I can't remember who was third. Between Perez and whoever was third, it was 17 kilometers an hour to the next non-Red Bull. But I want to look that up. It could have changed towards the end of the race when he went for the fastest lap. I don't know. But I do want to sort of check that, because even 17 kilometers an hour is insane. Like, just think it's 17 kilometers up the road in an hour. You know, it's mental. But I do want to. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm really not saying you're wrong. Maybe the stuff I had up wasn't right. But I do want to check it. But there we are. That is what day are we on? Tuesday? Is it Tuesday already? It's Tuesday already. Yeah, it was mad, wasn't it? I was looking at some. I don't want to carry on, but this is really nerdy, and it's not about Lando Norris anymore. I was looking at the rear wing technicalities and why they have such steep angles and how they can affect the DRS and things like that. And it seems like Red Bull have gone really aggressive on their rear wing. So it, like, to the naked eye, it doesn't look that much, but it seems like they've gone really aggressive on it. So it's really quite draggy, but then when it opens, like, they get such an advantage just because of how they've chosen to do it. But anyway, it's a bit nerdy, that. That is Tuesday's TSK F1. I may well be doing a video later. I might do a YouTube short. Not sure yet. Actually, I'm testing out a tent later. Different. Anyway, I will be live over on Pit Lane shortly, though I think I'm going to be playing a bit of something different this morning, not sim racing. And hopefully see you over there, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. And I will see you either later or in the morning, 9 a.m. Thank you very much, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.